This story is inspired by the biblical account of the Rechabites and is presented for inspiration and storytelling purposes. 200 years is a very long time. Kingdoms rise and disappear, kings are forgotten, cities are destroyed, and generations come and go. But sometimes, a promise made by one person can survive longer than an empire. This is the remarkable story of the Rechabites, a people remembered for holding on to an ancient command for generations, even when the world around them had completely changed. Long before the great events that would make their name remembered, a man named Jonadab, also known as Jehonadab, stood before his family and made a decision that would shape their future. He belonged to a nomadic family that did not want to become like the surrounding nations. While others were building houses, planting vineyards, drinking wine, and becoming attached to wealth and comfort, Jonadab believed that his people needed to live differently. He gave his descendants a simple command. They were not to drink wine, they were not to plant vineyards, they were not to own permanent fields, and they were not to build houses for themselves. Instead, they were to live as travelers, moving from place to place and depending on God rather than becoming prisoners of possessions. To modern ears, such a command might sound strange. Why would anyone choose a difficult life when comfort was available? Why refuse land, houses, and pleasures that other people enjoyed? But Jonadab was thinking about something deeper. He believed that a person could become so comfortable with the world that he would eventually forget what he had promised. His message was simple: do not allow comfort to make you forget your values. Years passed, then decades passed. Jonadab died, but his command did not die with him. His children remembered it. Their children remembered it, and their grandchildren remembered it. Generation after generation, the Rechabites continued living according to the ancient instruction. They could have easily abandoned the old rule. Nobody was standing over them with a sword. Nobody was forcing them to obey. The man who had given the command had been dead for generations. Yet they continued. That was what made their story extraordinary. Imagine being born into a world where nobody around you follows the rules your ancestors followed. Imagine seeing beautiful houses and knowing that your family refuses to build one. Imagine watching people enjoy vineyards and wine while your family continues to say no. Imagine being told that your ancestors made a promise 200 years ago and that your responsibility is to keep it. That is exactly what the Rechabites faced. Their loyalty was not tested for a day. It was tested for generations. Eventually, the kingdom of Judah entered a dangerous period. The armies of Babylon were approaching. War was coming. Fear spread across the land. The Rechabites left their usual places and entered Jerusalem to seek safety. Inside the city, something remarkable happened. The prophet Jeremiah received a message from God. He was instructed to bring the Rechabites into one of the chambers connected with the temple and offer them wine. Jeremiah placed wine before them. "Drink wine," he told them. For ordinary people, it would have been a simple invitation. But for the Rechabites, it was a test. Their response was immediate. They refused. They explained that their ancestor Jonadab had commanded them never to drink wine, never to plant vineyards, never to build houses, and never to settle permanently. They had obeyed him for generations. Even now, while surrounded by uncertainty and danger, they would not break the promise. Think about the power of that moment. They were not refusing because wine was unavailable. Wine was right in front of them. They were not refusing because someone threatened them. They were refusing because they remembered. They remembered a voice from generations before. They remembered a promise that their ancestors had considered more valuable than comfort. and Jeremiah used their faithfulness as a lesson for the people of Judah. The Rechabites had obeyed the command of their human ancestor, yet the people of Judah had repeatedly ignored the commands of God. The contrast was powerful. The Rechabites had held on to a tradition for generations, but the people who claimed to belong to God had often forgotten their own covenant. The story was not really about wine. It was about obedience. It was about remembering who you are when the world gives you permission to become someone else. The Rechabites understood something that many people forget. Character is built when nobody is forcing you to do the right thing. Anyone can follow a rule when punishment is standing nearby. But true character appears when the choice is completely yours. The Rechabites could have said, "Jonadab has been dead for a very long time. The world has changed. His rules belong to another generation." But they did not. They understood that some promises are bigger than the person who makes them. A promise becomes part of your identity when you choose to carry it forward. Their story also teaches us something about temptation. Temptation rarely arrives looking dangerous. Sometimes it arrives looking comfortable. Sometimes it says, "Just this once." Sometimes it whispers, "Everyone else is doing it." Sometimes it tells you, "Your old principles are outdated." And sometimes the most dangerous temptation is not pleasure itself, but the desire to fit in. The Rechabites lived among people who did things differently, yet they did not allow their surroundings to decide their identity. That is one of the hardest battles a human being can fight. The world constantly tells us what we should want: more money, more comfort, more attention, more possessions, more approval. But the Rechabites showed that a meaningful life is not always about having more. Sometimes it is about knowing what you are willing to say no to. Their refusal became their strength. Their discipline became their identity. Their ancient promise became their legacy. Imagine one of their children asking his father, "Why do we live this way?" The father might have answered, "Because our ancestor Jonadab told us to." Then the child might have asked, "But why should we still obey him after all these years?" And the answer would have been deeper than tradition. Because we have decided that our word matters. That is the heart of the story. A person who keeps his word when it becomes difficult is building something that money cannot buy. Trust, respect, character, legacy. The world remembers people who become rich, but it also remembers people who remain faithful. The Rechabites did not build magnificent palaces. They did not conquer nations. They did not become famous kings. Yet their discipline was remembered because they demonstrated something rare: consistency. 200 years passed, and their promise remained alive. Generation after generation had the opportunity to abandon it, but they continued. Their story reminds us that our decisions today may affect people we will never meet. A father who teaches honesty may influence his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. A mother who teaches courage may create a family that refuses to surrender when life becomes difficult. A person who chooses integrity today may leave behind a legacy that survives long after his name is forgotten. That is the hidden power of a promise. It can travel through time. And perhaps that is why the story of the Rechabites still speaks to us today. We live in a world that changes every day. Technology changes, fashion changes, opinions change, people change. But some values should never become outdated. Honesty, loyalty, discipline, faithfulness, respect, courage. These values may not always make life easier, but they can make life meaningful. The Rechabites teach us that you do not have to follow every road simply because everyone else is walking on it. You do not have to abandon your principles because the world laughs at them. You do not have to break a promise simply because keeping it has become inconvenient. Sometimes, the greatest victory is simply refusing to become the person you promised yourself you would never be. The Rechabites were tested with a cup of wine, but every generation faces its own cup. For one person, it may be greed. For another, betrayal. For another, anger. For someone else, fame or approval. The question is always the same. When temptation stands directly in front of you, will you remember who you are? The Rechabites remembered. And because they remembered, their story survived. 200 years could not erase their promise. War could not erase it. Fear could not erase it. Changing society could not erase it. And temptation could not erase it. Their greatest possession was not land. It was not a house. It was not wealth. It was their word. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson their story leaves behind. A person may lose possessions and still rebuild. A person may lose money and earn it again. A person may lose status and rise again. But when a person loses his character, rebuilding becomes much harder. So make your promises carefully, choose your values wisely, and when the world tests you, remember why you made the promise in the first place. Because a promise kept for one day is discipline. A promise kept for 1 year is commitment. But a promise carried faithfully across generations becomes a legacy. And that is why the ancient story of the Rechabites continues to whisper across the centuries. Stay true to your values, even when nobody is watching. Because the world may forget what you owned. It may forget what you achieved. It may even forget your name. But the character you leave behind can live far beyond you. And sometimes, the greatest story a person can leave behind is simply this: they gave their word, and they